So many entrepreneurs today are seeking opportunities in global markets but are often confused about where to begin. So our first panel will be addressing this key problem and will dive into how the cross-border collaboration can benefit entrepreneurs and ecosystem partners alike. So I'd like to now invite on stage our panelists along with our moderator, Tammy Ben-Haim, Consul General of Israel to South India. Please put your hands together and let's welcome our panelists. Hemin Barucha, Country Director, India, and Senior Leadership Team at London and Partners. Srinivas Rao Mahankali, CEO at T-Hub. Yes, you can keep those cheers going on for our panelists. Thank you. Aditya Agarwal, Executive Vice President, Digital Enterprise, Maruti Suzuki India Limited. And our moderator, Professor Anshuman Tripathi, Associate Professor, Production and Operations Management, IIM Bangalore, and I'm sure you're going to absolutely love this session. Thank you so much. Over to you, Anshuman.
All right, good morning, everyone. Okay, so I hope you're settling in, and I think some more people will walk in. So it gives me a great pleasure to be moderating this panel out here, and we have people from a very, very different backgrounds. We have T-Hub, Maruti, corporate, and we have London Partners, and we have a Consul General from Israel. Okay, and it's a great pleasure to do this. And in particular, I would say that, at IIM Bangalore, we started a program with Israel, and we started getting students there, and I coordinated the first 3 trips to Israel. So that was very interesting. So, and of course, entrepreneurship in Israel was very interesting, especially seeing where we see in India and how, especially in NSRCEL, we see that growing up. The theme for today's discussion is about cross-border collaboration. And of course, the first question that really comes to our mind is there a need for one? Okay, is there a need itself? Because that's what, when you study in an MBA school, the first question you ask is, if you have a product, is there a need for the product? So is there a need for this? And the other thing is, if it's cross-border collaboration, what are you really looking for? Are you looking for kind of a market opening just to expand the market? Or are you looking at some kind of a support to help you get your product in? Whether it's the last mile support or expanding your market, on what way? The other question that comes to your mind is also, is there a minimum size requirement? Should a firm grow to a certain size before they should start looking for cross-border help or something like that? So these are the initial questions. So I'll leave it open to the panel to address it, and probably we'll start with, Ms. Ben-Haim. How do you see Israel coming in this? Where's your view on this, on cross-border collaboration? I'll just give you a precursor. My visits to Israel and my exposure to entrepreneurs in Israel gave me one learning. Israeli entrepreneurs, at that time at least, they targeted Japan, Germany, and US for markets, China for manufacturing, and rest of the world, accessory if required. Has it changed, or do you see something more coming in?
Okay, very interesting. I don't know if is it working, or should I just, it's working? Excellent. One, thank you, and I have to hear more about your visits to Israel. But you're right, and we feel it today as well. Israel is a tiny country with a very small market in itself. And our entrepreneurs come out of the army, university, different places, and it's usually a very, very small initial group that starts to develop. So you're right, historically we've always looked to the US market, some to Japan, and to Europe as well, because we almost discount our internal market. And it's interesting because all our entrepreneurs, and if some of you are entrepreneurs and don't do it here, which I'm sure you do anyway, but they hardly use Hebrew. Entrepreneurs who are looking at the worldwide market from the day they start their company, those 2 young people sitting together, are not so young these days after Corona, but sitting together, all the history, all the correspondence, everything that they do in their company is all in English because they're already looking out. So the view is still towards the US and Europe. We are shifting, and one of my jobs here is to shift the viewpoint to India. And the speaker before, or one of the questions was, India is at the right place at the right time, and we're definitely feeling it. It is the right time, it is the right place. The growth rate of India, the economic growth rate, the entrepreneurial spirit here, the fact that you have so many engineers coming out is becoming, and the potential here, is a big, big draw to these younger companies now. And we're seeing more and more, they want to, more and more to come here and discover and figure it out and use it for maybe sometimes beta testing or finding the good cooperation with similar sort of initiatives here or with similar entrepreneurs here who are working the same. It's part of what we do with NSRCEL, is exactly this, finding the common, finding what is good, and seeing how we can help them work together. But it is still taking up some efforts on our part to shift the glance.
Yeah, one impression, sorry to say this, we have about Israel is fantastic products, fantastic thinking, very expensive.
Fair.
Okay, yeah, very expensive. Okay, with that, let me move to Mr. Bharucha. Okay, London and partners, you are looking at both inwards and outwards. How to get help into London, how to get help out of London. Out of London, it will be like search for markets probably, expansion, maybe support. Yeah, so just take it from there. Okay.
Thanks, Anshuman. Thank you for having me today. It's such a privilege to be here in this August IIMB. My name is Hemin Bharucha, and London and Partners, many people think we are a law firm, but we are not a law firm. We are the Mayor of London's office over here in India, London's Economic Development Agency. What we find, what my learning has been over the years, that what companies, be it British companies or Indian companies, what they are looking for is, number one, is their customer. They want a customer base. Second, they are looking for is talent, global talent, talent that can, across the world. And third is global VC funding. Yes, these are the top three things that they look for. And these days, I would add a fourth, maybe diversification to mitigate some of their risk and to get another market as well. So a lot of Indian companies are looking at diversification. And once they go international, I think the benefit, to your point, that what's the benefit of cross-border, companies become a lot more efficient. Automatically, foreign companies always are far more efficient, far more cost-effective. They realize that it's a lot easier to do business, especially in a place like UK, where ease of doing business is easy. So they scale up very quickly. In fact, a lot of them actually, primary market becomes the UK for them. Or conversely, like British companies, India becomes a very big market for them. If you see HSBC Bank, if you see Standard Chartered, if you see Suzuki, India is a very, very large market for them. So these are some of the benefits that they don't even think of, but because they go global, they can benefit from that. But I see diversification today playing a very key role, especially given the geopolitical climate.
Just as a follow-up, the kind of companies you deal with in India, is there a minimum size or scale you look at before you try to engage with them or something?
So,
or is it more about what the value they bring?
No. Look, obviously, we want economic benefit for London, so the kind of companies we look for are technology companies, knowledge-driven companies, also companies who will do good for London. So not companies who will come and pollute, people who are more in the sustainability space, but there's no minimum ticket size. In fact, that's why we are here. So my team, we have an office in Mumbai, in Bangalore, in Delhi, and is to support younger companies. But again, bear in mind sometimes, so we will even tell a company, no, maybe this is not the right time for you because a company may be too young. They may not have the right funding. London is also not a cheap place, but well-funded companies also get a lot of reward. I mean, let's bear in mind, returns are much higher. Pricing is much better. So no, there's no minimum ticket size that we look at, but we do advise companies if they are not well-funded, perhaps they should wait till they have that wherewithal to have the right people to scale up the way it would, and that's when they see the rewards.
Thank you, Mr. Bharucha.
Thank
you. Okay, forward. Mr. Agarwal, now you're coming from the corporate side, okay? Now, of course, you engage with startups and all in various ways, and that day when, every company used to say, oh, we do everything, is gone. You always look to create an ecosystem and support system in various ways. Yeah, how does Maruti or you say, for example, any corporate sector would like to engage with these kind of startups?
So thank you, Anshuman, and good morning, everyone. I must thank IIM Bangalore for having us here. So when we look at the startup ecosystem, in fact, I'm reminded of a small quote by our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. He says, we are all part of a global village. So where are the boundaries? We've actually gone away from the boundaries. And if you look at, I think Bharucha spoke about the Maruti example. Suzuki came here in 1983. They set up a small plant and with an investment of about 27 crores. And today, this year, our turnover was 1 lakh crores. So I think we've reached that level in the span of 40 years. And we started small. We were not a big company. We started with 900 vehicles a year. And today we do 6,000 vehicles a day. So, so the cross-border collaborations have been going on for a very long time, and why not in the startup world also? Why should I not look at a startup based out of Israel or based out of maybe Japan to do a use case which makes sense for us, and which technology I cannot get within the startup ecosystem in India. So if there is a merit of choosing a startup coming from Israel, coming from any part of the world for that matter, which makes business sense for a corporate like us, then it makes, then it is good business decision to really engage and go forward with them. And I must thank our MSR from T-Hub. We've already engaged with 2 startups, one coming from Japan, the other coming from Israel, in a mobility challenge that we do with T-Hub. And we found that the solutions that they offer were actually, were out of the box, and something that probably, we were still not reaching the state of maturity which these startups had reached when they talked about the solutions that they were offering. So if there is a business case, yes, definitely there is a need, and there is also a kind of, a way forward available for us to engage and for the startups to come in India.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Just as a follow-up, one of the things that we see, the moment we talk about Maruti, I think along with Reliance, these are the 2 companies you talk about as real scale in India. When you talk about scale, these are the 2 companies which really come to your mind. Now, when you look at a startup, and you come as a, this big Goliath, and the Goliath has to engage with David, not fight with David. Yes. Okay, so that's the difference out here.
Yes.
Okay. What are the efforts you do to actually make them into another mini Goliath at least? Okay.
So I think this is very...
I'll just give you a background on that. So I worked in Maruti 94 to 96. Oh, that was when Maruti went from 700 cars a day to 1,500 cars a day.
Yes.
And the supply base was found wanting. Okay, and that's definitely the scale challenge.
Yeah. So I think very, very good question. And I also joined Maruti in 94, by the way, and I've been here since. So what changes I've seen, I'll just maybe, so some of the suppliers that were working with us when we started small are still working with us. Actually, most of them. In fact, all of them. So whoever started with us is still working with us. They started small, we started small, and we've grown together. So we understand the pain point of a person who is small, who is, kind of not really understanding the way a corporate works. So we are very policy bound, right? As a corporate, we have a lot of approval systems, we have a lot of systems in place and policies which any startup would come and say, yeah, your approval process is too long. It takes 6 months to get something approved. So we cut down on that process. When we started our MAIL program, when we started our various initiatives, so MAIL is an accelerator program that we run for the startups, and we've done almost, now we are in the 9th cohort, 8th cohort and 9th cohort are going on. So what we do is, we've cut down on the total approval process itself. We have a system where we are able to engage the business teams directly, and the business teams also understand now that this is not a traditional way of, this is not a traditional vendor. Yeah, there is a level of maturity, which may not be there, but he has certain tech and he has certain enthusiasm which will drive this product forward. I'll give you a very small example. We had, we have recently launched the Grand Vitara, and this Grand Vitara, when we launched, the physical product was not available. So we couldn't display this in the showrooms. So traditionally, when you launch a new product, the vehicle has to be available in the showrooms for us to take bookings and customers to see and then, feel the product and then go ahead and decide that, yes, I want to buy this car. What do you do in a situation when the product is not available? So we went across and we said, yes, let us create a metaverse. Let's create a version of this car which is virtual, but people should be able to experience it in the real way. But we didn't have time. Now a startup comes in, he says, I can do this. And we've been talking to our ad agencies, we've been talking to all the big players that how can it be done? And they said, no, boss, we give up, nothing less than 3 months. We said 3 months we'll have the products. So we don't need a metaverse in 3 months, the actual car will be there. So this startup comes and says, I'll do it in 21 days. And he delivered. That is the power of a startup. He delivered in 21 days. We had 400 showrooms equipped with Oculus devices, all people trained, and the meta was up and running. No failures. That is the power of a startup. And our people realize that it is just not about, creating, it's just not about looking at bigger partners. It is also trying to harness the power of the small and make them big.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. That's really encouraging. That's very good. Finally, let's come to Mr. Srinivas Rao. T-Hub, government, academia, startups, everything coming together. Okay, take us through, where do you see some of your startups looking for cross-border collaboration? See, the way, when I especially, if I remember when we were running these programs in Israel, we used to take our students and they used to do projects with startups here in the Bangalore area. What we were looking at is basically support from Israel in two ways, these startups. First, the last mile. You do everything, but you just don't know how to get to market. There's that little bit of a help required at that point. And the second thing is you go to market, but you don't know how to scale. I guess these are the two problems you still face, okay? I think searching for a market is a little far-fetched. Let's know, of course, we know that in the SaaS industry, it's pretty much a US market. But in other industries, let's, more than the market, where else do you see cross-border collaboration really coming up in your direct field of work?
Sure. So first of all, Professor Anshuman, thank you for having me here. I happen to be an IMB alum.
Oh, wonderful.
Again, a lot of people here might call me a dinosaur because I passed out 36 years ago, which is a long time ago. Right? So nice to be back here. And so to come back to your question about this cross, I'll give you some examples of some of the work we are doing and then build on what we said. So one of the things we keep getting asked very often is, as an incubator / accelerator, what is it that you actually do for a startup? Right? So obviously at T-Hub, one of the things we have is, of course, we have a very nice physical space, very large space, and Aditya has been there several times, so has Hemin, and so on. So apart from the physical infrastructure, it is also about creating the soft infrastructure for startups to scale. Right? So we put together a framework. We call it the 6 M's. Right? So one is about methodology. Right? So how do you help a startup move from an idea to an MVP? Okay, for a startup which already has some traction, Mukesh talked about product market fit and go to market. How do we help them on that path? And so on, right? Then the third part is market access. So fundamentally, if you ask me, and having been an entrepreneur twice over, what are the 3 most critical things for a startup, apart from the idea, right? I think obviously market access is critical, money is critical, and having the right kind of mentors is critical, right? Now, coming back to the question about this international collaboration, today we run a number of programs where we have our startups which have global ambitions, right? So for example, you talked about SaaS, right? So clearly with SaaS is, the whole philosophy is you build in India, but build for the world, right? And today, the way many of our startups are expanding is they first look at adjacent markets. So for example, the Middle East, ASEAN, and then look at the Holy Grail, which is getting to the US, right? US or, the developed world, if you will, right? Now, the converse is also true, right? So we see, for example, just to give you some examples of some of the work we've done. So for example, last month, we had a team of 15 entrepreneurs from Armenia come here, right? It's a small country, 4 million people, right? The diaspora is actually larger than the population of Armenia itself. They have about 10 million Armenians who live outside Armenia and only 4 million who live there. And they do some really interesting work in different areas. For example, sustainability, AI, right? Mobility, for example, right? Again, the same challenge as what the CG from Israel talked about. The domestic market is too small. They have to find ways to crack other markets, right? What is their challenge? For example, the Armenian challenge is twofold. Talent is a challenge, right? Because country of 4 million people, right? There's only so many, for example, so many developers you can get, right? So they are now thinking about how can we use India as a pool for talent, which is something which Hemin referred to, right, as an example. That's one. Second is how, India as a market, right, for solutions and so on. So we've done programs, for example, we have a program where, for example, we've run a program with Canada. It's called Waste to Wealth. So about half a dozen of their startups which are looking to come in to India and provide solutions as the name suggests, so on. So clearly, if you talk about collaboration, it can be in 3 or 4 different areas. One is the obvious one, which is market access. Second is talent. Third could be in innovation, right? What I mean by innovation is co-creation. So for example, many of our EV companies, okay, which are, and we have some, last count, I think 50 plus EV companies which are being set up, will require companies which are working on battery management systems, telematics, etc., and lithium-ion cells or whatever else, where you can potentially partner with companies there. The other question which you talked about was in terms of what is the critical size.
Critical size, yeah.
Now I'll put it this way: I don't think you can put a rule of thumb saying what it is, but it also, I think one of the things which I know we've talked to him in at length, for example, is, for example, if a company is looking to expand into developed market, right, they need to have adequate runway, right, in terms of cash, right? So if you don't, for example, if you can't set aside, let's say, anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million or some number like that, because it will take you time. What works in India, understanding the regulatory landscape, understanding the cultural, barriers, right, getting the right team, to be able to execute in that market, will take you some time, some effort, and some money.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Srinivasrao. But I just want to come back again to this, okay? It actually leads to my second question, which was like, are there any formal processes that you have? You answered some part of it. Coming back again, with these smaller companies and all, how do they start? Is it that companies are forthcoming and the small guys has an idea and he wants to come to you and says, okay, can you help me out? Or is it that you say, even before you come to me, come with a little bit of a structure before you come to me? Because otherwise it is just like too much time consuming listening to every possible idea, okay? So where do you really start off, especially with T-Hub?
So obviously, our role, we are like NSRCEL, a not-for-profit entity. So we also have a social purpose, right? So obviously our intent is to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I think we all know, mortality rates and all of that. I won't get into that. But clearly what we need to do is, and let's go back to a number which Ganesh talked about. We have 85,000 registered startups in DPIIT and probably an equal number unregistered, right? Which looks like a large number. We talk about we are number 3 behind, US and China. But when you think about a country with 1.4 billion people, it's still a very small number, right? We need probably 1 million, plus startups, right? And I link that a little bit to employment numbers, right? So today, if you take, for example, the MSME sector, many startups will graduate to become MSMEs. We have 63 million MSMEs, according to the last published data, out of which probably a third died during COVID. So give or take, maybe we have about 40 million. 95% of them employ less than 5 people, right? We are adding about 12 million people to the workforce every year. 12 million young people to the workforce every year. So we need to create jobs. Right. So this whole thing about demographic dividend, etc., will not play out if we can't create engines which can create jobs. And jobs will be created by entrepreneurs, right? By people who decide to set up, formal employment is declining. We have data to evidence that. So when you talk about this, coming back to this idea stage, so I think what we do, for example, is we have different programs for different stages of the journey. So obviously what you run as an incubation program vis-a-vis an acceleration program is very different. The needs of the startups at that stage is very different. So we have a thing called Idea House, which we do every month. We ask people to just walk in, register online, come in, talk to us, spend time, listen to them, and then figure out whether, most of the time we go back and tell them, you need to do some more work before you decide to take the plunge.
So, yeah, sorry. I think keeping in line with the theme of the discussion, can you come up, tell us about, a couple of examples where, how did a startup feel the need for cross-border collaboration. Maybe an example of two, or how you helped out. Okay, maybe that will help our audience understand this requirement very easily.
So I'm going to talk about, I'll take two examples. One, an Indian startup wanting to go global, and another, startup from other countries wanting to come here. Just to startup from other locations wanting to come here. So for example, we have an interesting construction-related startup, which, the name of the startup is construction.ai, right? It's actually based in Bangalore, but their dev center is in Hyderabad, right? Because it's cheaper to do business in Hyderabad, okay? I had to say that, okay?
Yeah, you have to say that. Yeah.
I had to say that, okay. So these guys have built a platform which basically uses drones and high-speed cameras to look at the construction of a building and be able to estimate where you are vis-a-vis the timeline from a progress standpoint, and also quality parameters, high-resolution cameras and all of that stuff. So they've figured out very quickly that trying to build a business of this kind in India is going to be a serious challenge. It's going to take them time and effort. They're not going to be able to monetize adequately, right? Because they felt their customers were not so discerning, and also many of their customers didn't want to hear the truth, type of thing. So they came to us, and we paired with an accelerator based in the Bay Area. This is an entity called FalconX. Some of you may have heard of it. So these guys have basically a lot of the first generation of Indian entrepreneurs who went to the US and became successful, right? So we've done a pairing program with them. We sent about 5 of our startups last year. Spent a month, an immersion program, sitting there and trying to figure out, first of all, how to, your whole messaging has to change when you go to a different market, right? It has to be much more, because it is a large market, but a very competitive market. So how do you get your messaging right? How do you get your pitch right? How do you get your economic model of doing business right, and all of that stuff? Now, I'm happy to say that this particular company has now, from doing about something like 100K on an annualized basis in the first 3 years of struggle in India, is now close to 1.5 million ARR, right? Just purely by engaging and understanding, working on a pairing arrangement with the startup. I'll give you the example in reverse. So we had we worked with a university in Australia called Latro. It's based in the Melbourne area. And they had 6 of their startups which were looking to come into India, right? And essentially, they needed to understand the regulatory landscape. They needed to hire their first set of teams here in India, and also find out the pricing and distribution model.
That's the challenge,
right? To figure out how that could be done. We've done that. Similarly, with Korea, there's an entity called COSME, the Korea Small and Medium Industries, enterprises type of thing. I didn't know this. We learned this along the way, that there's a large market, large number of startups in Korea which work on beauty and wellness, right? And which found, India has 1.4 million people, right? I don't know what the gender divide is, but it's must be a fairly large number, right? So they found
who's Korean beauty products?
who want to use Korean beauty products,
Okay, fantastic.
right? So we put together a program, ran a program together with them for 6 months, and I'm happy to say about 8 of their startups now have set up shop in India.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. That was very interesting. So what I gather from you, from T-Hub, is it's not like one size fits all. It's on a case-by-case basis. That takes me to Mr. Agarwal. Now, as a large company, can you really follow one size fits, does not fit all, and every time on a case-by-case basis? And how challenging is it? And in particular, I would like to say, now, in India, for example, yes, you engage with our NSRCEL, with T-Hubs and other such accelerators and incubators. But suppose it's a one-off from somewhere abroad who comes in as a startup. How would you go through that process?
So we've had our learnings from MS Hassan, so he keeps telling us how to do, what to do. In Maruti also, we are engaging with the startups through very, very structured programs. So we start with Nurture, which is a pre-incubation program for very early startups who have not yet reached a product maturity stage. Then we have the incubation program that we run with IIM Bangalore and NSRCEL. And in fact, we've done the last startup that came to us through this program, True Assist. He's made a swivel chair which will enable physically challenged people to, get in and get out of the car. And that product has been granted a patent also. And he is figured in one of the leading, news stories also. So then we have, of course, our acceleration program, which is MAIL, which is our flagship program. And we run a mobility challenge for very, very mature startups with T-Hub. So that's how we've structured ourselves. We have different programs for startups in different stages of their journey, maturity as we see it. Now, having said that, it's just not, it's just not about fitting a startup into a program. It is also about what is the problem statement and how can you marry it with what expertise the startup brings in. So we could, for example, we had a startup who came from Japan. His name is I'm Besides You. So they are into facial recognition software, and based on sentiment analysis, they can tell a customer is willing to buy a car or not. That was our use case. But yes, so it's very important these days that you look at somebody and you can tell, yeah, this guy looks to be an interested customer, and maybe put more focus on him and try to convert him. So these are use cases. Probably, and of course, we have been working with him. He had experience from facial expressions in Japan, which probably didn't work in India, so he had to rework the algo again, and again look at a lot of data from our video recordings, and then try to make his model work in the Indian condition. That was also a big challenge. So sometimes technology that might work in US or what might work in Japan may not work in India. So here the challenges are very different. But yes, we are a big nation. We are 1.4 billion. We have our share of challenges. Being a big nation, we are a developing country. So we have problem areas, starting with everything, water, electricity, the basics, and highways. And of course, if I come to my industry, we have just started looking at sustainability and looking at how do we reduce this, how do you bring it to carbon net zero. So all these things are now coming in, and somebody who's got expertise, somebody who comes in with an expertise in this area will probably be able to get in and really do maybe a big kind of help to the Indian automobile ecosystem. So it's just, so what we offer to startups is a ready use case. What we offer to startups is ability to scale. So somebody comes in from, say, Israel, and he wants to set up or see what he can do in India. Probably it will take him some time to really, look at the entire ecosystem, then look at what is the market like, do a research, do his primary finding of where should he really start working on, what market, what industry should he start looking at. When he comes through a mature program like MAIL or any one of our programs, or he comes through NSRCEL or T-Hub, and we are able to get a problem statement versus solution offered, fit, we are home. And scale, we can definitely provide. So we've currently worked with we've screened about 1,500 startups. We've done about 50 POCs. We've partnered with now more than about 12 startups. And I think we've been able to give businesses in excess of about 500 million to these startups. So I think that is where we are. And we offer solid business cases. It's not just, just a POC and that's it. So some of these, as I said, they mature in the journey, and then there is a big possibility of horizontal deployment, vertical deployment across other areas. In fact, we also take these startups, so whilst we are scouting for startups from outside, we also take our startups to Japan. And recently we have just done a trip, and of course, NSRCEL was part of that trip. What we do is we expose them to corporates in Japan. So through our partner, Will, they help us in organizing this entire showcase. And they can showcase to corporates in Japan and see if there is a fit happening there, and they can find a business opportunity. Good for them.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Mr. Barucha, now coming back. No, you represent the Mayor of London, the London economic system out here. Are there any formal processes, both ways, okay, for London-based businesses looking for opportunities here, and for startups from here looking for opportunities? I leave it to you.
So London, the UK, ranks number 8 in the world in terms of ease of doing business. So literally you can go online and you can set up, and it's very easy. little more tricky when companies want to set up in India, and I think that's something that puts companies off. So Hyderabad, for example, very welcoming for the bigger companies, who will create bigger jobs. But there's a lot of value even in the smaller companies, the 5 people, 20 people companies, very innovative products. Nobody's really there to hold their hand and bring them over here. In fact, just last month in March, we had the Deputy Mayor of London bring a delegation down here to Bangalore. Again, these were smaller companies, but they were companies who were ready to grow. They were looking for partners over here. But again, sometimes just the ease of doing business bit is a bit tricky, Get a pan, get a tin. They don't even know what all that means. Put a rubber stamp on everything. Somebody's grandchildren played with a rubber stamp. So, they don't, so I think that's a bit of a challenge. But it's simple, but the rewards are very high. When companies set up over here in India, the rewards are very high, and equally the other way around. But no, I don't think there's any major hurdle or such in. And to be fair, the Indian government is also working. If you see ease of the ranking, we've been making tremendous progress over there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bharucha. Ms. Benham, coming back here, Israel. So how do you aid your entrepreneurs looking out to India? So one of the examples which comes to my mind, and this, I think I read it about 3 years back, and actually the Indian ambassador to Israel, his next posting was as ambassador to UAE. And he facilitated that manufacturing which moved away from China to India. It was, I think, the cleaning of the solar panel system, and that, for the first time, we finally got some Israeli company showing an interest in manufacturing in India. I guess that's expanding a lot. I hope so. Okay. So yeah, can you just tell us, what are the opportunities you see for Israeli, entrepreneurs in India, and how does that expand? And are there some policies, opportunities that you have to encourage Indian entrepreneurs to look at Israel for solutions, especially the last mile ones,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start first with trying to bring the Israeli entrepreneurs here. As I said, because there are many things where we're different from scale, size, market, but also many things that were similar, it makes a lot, and we're working on many of the same issues. You spoke about solar panels, but green energy in general, all the issue of EVs or combating climate change are things that many Israeli entrepreneurs are working on, and we see it growing and growing also here in India. So some things are complementary, some things are the same, so it makes a lot of sense to work together. So we're trying to promote this. We have my section, or the non-trade section, that does any size or any company that comes. They don't need to be at a scale. And then obviously the trade company that does more the B2B and, already maybe more mature and ready to do business companies. So we actually do try to assist any and all levels that come to us. And we don't have we have a few specific programs, but we also help without the program. We do tailor make it.
You just mentioned, you specifically look at B2B and not B2C?
No, that's what I'm saying. We have a trade team that does the B2B, and then they do B2C as well. We do anything we do B2B, but I'm trying to say that we do basically everything, just whether it's, even in a very, very founding stage, or just let's do the research together, which we're doing as well. For example, with C Camp, where they're just doing the research. It's not, nobody knows and nobody expects it. Hopefully it will become a valuable product one day, but we're really just doing the academic research part. That's what I was trying to say. We have some programs, Israeli-Indian programs. We have the I4F, which just reopened now for another 5 years. So if anybody wants to apply, it has to be an Indian startup and an Israeli startup, and they can apply to get grants from both sides, from the Indian government and the Israeli government. And you spoke about the UAE. Last year, the Quad, the UAE, USA, India, and Israel formed a Quad now, and we're working on the issues of food security, global health, right? We said about cross-border here when we started. So basically issues that are relevant to these 4 countries, which basically cover everything, but also hoping that whatever comes up or whatever projects come up will assist or be beneficial for other places internationally, and not just specifically for the 4 countries. So we have, these major, major programs, but you were speaking about tailor-made or non-tailor-made. maybe because we're still not at the scale that you're working on, where you have so many and we're still working on attracting people, we can actually tailor-make, or have bespoke programs for every single company that comes to us. But I will say something about that, because you mentioned, you asked about knowing what you want. So we see it not only in small companies, we see sometimes companies that are medium, or even, I had it one time with, I would call it a large company by now, and they came and they had a very, I don't want to say what it is because there's not too many of them, but a very, very innovative, interesting idea. And they're running, they have a whole board, it's a very serious, and when they came here and we had meetings for them, at some point, what do you want? What do you want from, you're here, do you want to sell us the product? Do you want to have a partnership? And it was so interesting to see that obviously size matters and where you are matter, but it just was interesting to see that even this company that's very known, and very mature in Israel, came here and really they brought their highest level, and they could not answer this question, what do you want? So I think it's something that you need to know from the beginning, what you want. So I hope I answered.
When we're talking about cross-border, cross-border, it's okay. We cannot stop this conversation without talking also about cultural challenges. Okay, and I think that's a huge thing. We saw that in Israel directly when you sit and you have the Israeli entrepreneurs out there, how you speak, how they speak, what their expectations are, what your expectations are. Can you talk us through some challenges you have faced, and if there's some efforts you're making in that direction?
Absolutely, but I'll preface all this and say, especially with the younger, but it's, again, as I said, entrepreneurs are not young anymore. There's all ages. So
Israel, they are all post-conscription, everything. They
also
are
here, I met, in IMB a few people who I was very, second career, so I'm not being ageist or any, but especially with the younger, year by year, it's getting better, and I think globally culture is more similar, or at least we are aware of each other's culture, so it's becoming better and better, especially, and this is why I said the younger, there's no TikTok, but Insta Reels, and a lot of the base of our culture, especially as, again, with 30 and under, is a similar base of culture. It doesn't matter if I live in India or Israel or California, we're all watching the same things, and the jokes, the mom jokes on those reels are the same mom jokes, and we roll our eyes at the same thing. So it's becoming culture, or at least part of culture is becoming international, which helps. But you're right, this is also what we're here basically to mitigate with, or try to figure out. In Israel, we're both 75 years old, but we forget that we have 3,000 years behind us, and Indians remember that they have 3,000 years, so they're not in a rush. And in Israel, we want everything done today or yesterday or by, end of day today. So helping people explain that it won't be this way here. Once you hit success or you make the correct joint venture, you'll be very successful, and you'll be successful for years. So you have to think long term. You have to keep this in mind and not expect even maybe a smaller win or something, but just to get it very quickly, because you might find out you did it incorrectly, perhaps with the wrong person, perhaps this wasn't the best for you. It's better to have, to breathe in and realize that things will work here, not at the same speed that you're used to in Tel Aviv or Haifa or any place in Jerusalem. That's the main issue. And Israelis in general, and I do it too, we say things outright to the face. I think this, I'll tell you. And sometimes, we need, it's not the correct.
You need diplomacy, right?
Yeah, exactly. You need to remember that maybe you can phrase something differently, and not everybody wants to hear all the time exactly what you want to tell them right now. So I think on these two things, taking the time and mitigating, or being a diplomat in what you say, even if you're not a diplomat, are two lessons.
Thank you. So patience and diplomacy. Let's move to the British representative. Okay, you're supposed to be the experts in diplomacy, right? Okay. Hey, anything to add on that, Mr. Baruch?
No, so I think culture does play a very important role, because to understand the other person, the other side, it takes. So India, for example, we just don't say no to anything. And people don't, like in the UK, if you say something will be done, it will be done. But here, they say no problem, it will get done. If you go to Delhi, it's even a step further. Ho gaya ji, so it's already done. So those bits are a bit of a challenge. But I think I'm probably being stereotypical. India has come a very long way. Indians have come a very long way. And the professionalism that Indians have today, be it keeping to time. I was very pleased to see that you all started the session on time. And, normally there's a lamp lighting and everything gets really late and whatever. But, so there is a newfound respect for India. People do take overseas, people do take Indians seriously. Today, if you see Indians hold top positions all over the world. Equally, coming from a country like UK or London, it is very diverse. In fact, 6% of London's population is people of Indian origin. Our deputy mayor of London is Mr. Agrawal from Indore. Yeah. The Prime Minister is the, no, but Mr. Agrawal was born, studied everything in Indore and then moved to an amazing story. With just 200 pounds, he went to London, started a $1 billion Forex company. Mayor invited him to be the deputy mayor, and for the last 7 years, he's been of Indian origin. So when he comes here, he speaks amazing Hindi. In fact, the journalist has to tell him to tone down his Hindi. It's so good and pure. But yeah, so it is very diverse. There are multiculturals. People are aware to be, but yes, culture does play a big part in doing business, and India probably needs to step up and be more, I wouldn't say professional, but probably needs to move on from that mindset of just saying yes to everything if they can't deliver something, because that's something that pulls us back.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Agarwal, anything to add on that as you deal?
Great future for the Agarwals, I think.
That was always there, I guess. That was always there.
Yeah, so we've been, Maruti and Suzuki, we've been working together for now 40 years. So if you talk about culture and you talk about cultural amalgamation, we've been, I think, one big example of how a Japanese company can come to India, set up a unit here and make it successful. And so how does it happen? We have, traditionally, we don't have any boardrooms, we don't have any corner room, with a view. We all sit in the open together, we eat in the same canteen, we eat the same food. The MD would come and stand in the queue with others and have the same food as the workers. So we've been, bringing that Japanese culture in, and we've been imbibing it, and probably that's one reason that we've been so successful till now. We have very few layers of management, as of course you've been there for a few years. The number of layers is very, very less. So our decision-making system is very, very robust. And so imagine a company who's been doing that for 40 years suddenly decides to give it up for inviting startups, for making room for startups to work in an environment which the startups feel at home with. So if you come to a digital enterprise office or to the innovation office, there are no uniforms. There is no fixed seating. There is a special area dedicated only for startups. There is no fixed time. Of course, the food and everything is there. There is a queue, but then there is no hierarchy there. So this is what we do. This is how we have created an environment for startups to really come and work with us. And it is just not about having one office. When they go into the plant, I don't think we have that, elaborate. We try to cut down on red tape as much as possible. So entry, exit, working, there is a whole lot of permits that are required if you want to operate in the plant, maybe on a machine. So there will be hot work, there will be so many things that somebody would need, safety clearance, everything. We ensure that they don't get into any trouble there. We ensure that if it's a POC being done, there is a time limit commitment of 3 months, we'll finish it in 3 months. And we will tell the business that if you're okay, let's go ahead. And you will not believe that some of these startups, while the proof of concept is going on, the business team would say, yeah, please onboard him. I don't want to work with him, and I think they have a fantastic solution. Let's onboard them and let's take them ahead. So I think if that is, that is how we've been able to fit these startups into our culture. And that is the reason probably that our startup programs are very successful. I'll call them successful. Because
these startups, they speak good about us. The startups themselves are actually experiencing. So while they are engaged with us, some of them have, most of them, and if I take an average, they have seen a valuation increase of almost 10x. The employee strength went up by almost 5x. So, these are some metrics where we see that yes, it is not only benefiting us, it is also benefiting these startups. So I think if that kind of mutual, I would say, beneficial arrangement we are able to really get into, it helps both sides.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. So, Mr. Srinivas Rao, just a few words before we go open up to the audience, okay, for questions. Entrepreneurship, patience, oxymoron?
No, I think I put it this way, right? As an entrepreneur, first of all, it's about the ability to do two things at once. Okay? What I mean is, there are short-term things which you have to solve for. So I think even Mukesh talked about, right? Can I meet payroll next month, for example? How do I keep the company alive, particularly during difficult times? And also it's about building for the long haul, right? So being able to do, it's almost like being able to do two things at once, right? Holding two almost contradictory thoughts in your head, sort of thing. But, I think it's fair to say that apart from a few maybe notable exceptions, it does take time. If you want to build a company, you want to build an institution which is there, right? And take an example of this, right? The example which Aditya San, I've also started using San, thanks to Rohan San and Aditya San for a while. It takes time to build something. Okay, so you have to be patient, and I will use a farming metaphor for this, right? So, for example, if you're trying to grow something, right, a plant or a tree or something, you can give it, the right amount of sunshine, water, manure, all of that. The plant will grow at a certain pace. You can't accelerate that beyond a point. It will not, if you give it tons of water or whatever, right, it's not going to grow. It's same thing. It takes time for you to build an institution. It takes time, and it takes patience.
Thank you. So yeah, I think we have had some interesting views from all panelists. Leave it open for the audience if you have any questions for them. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, just speak loudly, I guess. So.
My question is to Tammy. Congratulations first on the 75 years of independence. If yesterday's event was anything to go by, I think you have embedded yourself very well in Bangalore. My question is, you're a nation of 8 million people, and you've been able to produce an insanely powerful impact in the rest of the world in terms of whether patents, the number of NASDAQ filings that you've had, market cap that you've created, technologies that you've created. What is it that we in India can learn from that? We are a nation of whatever, 1.5 billion, I think, is a number that's tossed around. So what can we learn from that experience that you have? How did you do it?
Yeah, for some it's not a huge, but we're almost. But you asked a very good question.
Just closer to the mouth.
It's okay. One, we had no choice. Where our innovation started with things you need to survive. How do we get water? How do we grow plants in the desert? How do we get clean water to everybody? How do we supply the food? So when you have these basic questions or basic issues that if you don't solve them, you won't survive, you find yourself or everybody becoming an entrepreneur even before we knew how to say it. So this mindset started out of necessity and out of the need to survive, and I think it developed. We were a very young nation. We faced challenges. We faced different wars. How do you, even how can you win a war strategically or tactically when you don't have enough weapons, when you don't have an army that's trained enough, when it's too small? So we had on a few different levels, whether it's defense, survival, setting up electric systems from nothing, setting up roads, transport. So it started out of need. But then, with these years, we've developed with this mindset because it's not that we suddenly found water. It's not that we suddenly, are not in the desert anymore. So these things need to keep developing and moving forward. So I think the mindset just, was from necessity, and it just kept on growing and developing and getting a lot. And this is why we are, I think number 3 or 4 now in NASDAQ and per capita, and just because we had to do it. And secondly, you spoke about international cooperation, and you mentioned Albania. What happened in Israel in the 1970s and then again in the early 1990s, we got a huge influx of immigration from Russia, and from back then, the Soviet Union as well. So we suddenly got an influx of what you have here naturally, of engineers, we had some trained engineers, things that we don't even need in Israel because we don't have trains, and doctors. So we had all these researchers, scientists. So we suddenly had an influx, and at one point it was 1.5 million almost at one time, of very, very educated, high-level people. And again, same thing here. So you have the necessity, and then you have these people. And this is how we started our incubators, accelerators. We're like, what are we going to do with them? So the government at the time was like, we'll set up a place. Computers were starting to come in. Let's give them a place to do what they do, right? I think it's exactly what I said, no set places do. And this is how it developed. So, with the years, with the layers, again, with the issues we were faced with, we kept finding solutions that were maybe different or less known at the time, but layer by layer by layer, and this is how we got to where we are today. And again, I think, you'll talk to me in 10 years. Hopefully we'll have even, more things to talk about, or, be in more fields than we are even now.
Hello. What is the importance of domain knowledge to start a startup in any area or in any sector? Whether one needs to have a proper domain knowledge before we start the startup. What is the importance of a domain knowledge to start the startup? The question is to Mr. Srinivas Rao. Is it necessary that they should have a domain knowledge? So what is your suggestion, sir?
This is okay. So obviously, put it this way, right? If you don't, for example, suppose you were to say, I want to build a startup which is going to solve for, let's say, some disease, let's say cancer. If you don't understand it, it's hard. Obviously, it's good to say I'm passionate about solving it. It's something which impacts, a lot of mankind and a lot of person kind, for example. But if you don't understand the space, it is hard. It is hard. Obviously, you can say I have the, obviously people talk about this whole thing about knowledge, attitude, and skills, right? So if you have the right attitude, you can acquire skills and knowledge, but it's generally hard. So usually, if you look at any, successful startup in general, think of even the big ones. Most of the time, these are startups which have been built because of typically a visceral personal experience. Somebody has felt, think about an Uber, think about an Airbnb, or think about, for example, I think Mukesh talked about Zerodha, for example, right? So both the Kamath brothers used to trade, and they found that the whole, the trading mechanisms, or the way for people were paying a lot of money for trading. So they understood the space, they identified what problems. So if you know the domain, if you know the domain, you will know what problems or challenges or deficiencies they exist in that space, right? And so then you can think, okay, if I can solve this problem at scale, which means it impacts a lot of people, I can actually build a scalable business.
Right. Told us time for just about one more question. So, okay, fine, please. Go ahead.
So we've noticed, so I'm from NSRCEL, so we've noticed in smaller countries with, I would say, smaller population density, but a larger density of startups, Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, some countries of East Africa, there are organizations which are having services of, combination of incubation, and then they also advise startups who are coming from abroad to set up things there, which they call startup soft landing services, and obviously also contribute to policy for emigration of potential startup founders to those countries. It's an open question. Anybody from the panel can take it. Who, in your opinion, in India should take that role? Should it be an incubator? Should it be a completely independent organization? Or should it be some fun startup doing this in the future?
Okay, good question. I guess, no, I think both of you represent that position for your respective, places. Yeah, please, Mr. Balsha.
If I understand the question correctly, in India, how should we do it? See, without government support, it's always difficult to do something. So somewhere the government, be it the state government or be it the central government, like T-Hub is a fantastic example. It could be public-private, but you do need that government support and backing, because otherwise, there are a lot of policies which, even as an economic development agency, we can't do anything about. So, I think government needs to be there. Second, I think the community itself, the startup community itself, people have to learn to give back. It's not just about taking. That's something that's also very important. And third, I think that culture of innovation, culture of, Mukesh made a very good point that it shouldn't be just about valuation all the time. It should be about passion, weeding out the bad companies, getting into good companies. So I think these three would be, in my opinion, but without government support, I don't think much can be done.
I think it's a good monetization opportunity for any startup who would like to do this. And with government support and with having the right approach and, of course, visibility of who wants to come to India, how can you really patch into them? And then ensuring that once they're here, what kind of business case are they able to build for themselves? Because that is also very important. So you could start by not being, actually, maybe not having an entity here. Do start business small, and then as you grow, start creating that entity. So I think that should be the logical approach. But somebody has to be here who can help them source business. Once that happens, and of course, T-Hub, NSRCEL, they're doing a great job on this account. And of course, collaborating with people from all over the world so that they can bring startups here and they can start working in this space. Yeah. But big opportunity we have in India, that's for sure.
Spenham. Much panelists, and I think we have run out of time now. Thank you very much, okay, and all the best.
Once again, big thank you to all of our panelists and moderator, Professor Anshuman. That was quite a riveting session, and of course, thank you so much for your insights on the same.